The murder of Nona Dirks. I was pregnant with my son at the time, and live in the same county where it happened. It kept me up many nights, and still does at times. The man they think did it is in prison now for a totally different reason, trying to kidnap numerous women at Walmart and Hobby Lobby. Her boyfriend at the time, who they tried to first pin it on, was found not guilty and became a defense lawyer. The police did such a shoddy job getting evidence, that they really have none. They just automatically accused the boyfriend, while the other guy, who had just gotten out of prison for trying to kill a female jogger 2 years before, who was also Nona's neighbor, was helping the police. His ex-wife is the one who pointed the police to him. You'd have to look it up. There are so many mistakes that were made. But, it still scares me to think about it. Russ Faria. He was innocent and was at a friend's house with several other people when the crime was committed. He was arrested, indicted and found guilty, and spent 3 years in prison before he was exonerated and the real killer was found. Stephen Port. The Met Police didn't think the deaths of 2 of the victims were connected, even though the bodies were found just 3 weeks apart, in the same churchyard, against the same wall, in the same position, by the same dog walker. I think the cops on the Green River killer were completely inept. One of the victims' brothers actually took the cops to Gary Ridgway's house and told them that's where she went. It's been a while since I read the book, but there were a lot of other things that were completely bungled in my opinion. Ridgway was said to have a low IQ, but he would leave cigarette butts and gum he picked up off the streets to leave at crime scenes. He outsmarted the cops for years. Jessica Lunsford. I agree that was the worst. As much as I want to say the Mary Boyle case has the worst police work, at least she definitely was already dead by the time their corruption started affecting the investigation. Jessica Lunsford would still be here, and they had many chances to save her. They just failed. I hope they spent at least a month in the cell next to her killer for negligence. Cooey spent very little time in prison for a 1978 burglary. In 1991 he assaulted a 5-year-old but was released early. Dude was clearly a danger to kids and didn't spend nearly enough time in jail. The Burger Chef murders in Speedway, Indiana in 1978. The 4 young employees were nowhere to be found when a friend dropped by at midnight. The police thought the employees had taken some money and went partying after work, so they didn't consider the place a crime scene. The restaurant was cleaned and allowed to reopen, destroying any potential evidence. 2 days later, the bodies of the 4 workers were found 20 miles away in a wooded area. 2 had been shot, 1 had been stabbed, the other bludgeoned to death. Investigators believe they know who committed the crime but have no physical evidence. One of the officers assigned to the case admitted that we screwed it up from the beginning. There was a 911 call I heard where a woman locked herself in her wardrobe and called saying her ex-boyfriend had broken into her home with a weapon and she was scared he was going to kill her, and the operator told her that there was no police in the jurisdiction where she lived and so there was no one to call to ask for help, and so she just stayed on the phone with her, terrified knowing no one was coming. I just learned about Richard Valentino, a serial killer who kidnapped and assaulted multiple women in SC in 1974 and murdered at least 3. Not women, actually, young teenage girls for the most part. 2 were 13 and were snatched off the beach while on a short walk in broad daylight. They were supposed to be back in 30 minutes, and when the family had searched for several hours they made a police report, emphasizing that these were good kids who would not run off. Police didn't take it seriously. It was 1974, I understand, and the hippie kid taking off for no reason or for a boyfriend/girlfriend was still the dominant stereotype. But these were 7th or 8th graders who vanished within a 30-minute window, and the police just shrugged and said they probably ran off with some boys. Nothing was done until more girls disappeared or attempts were made to kidnap others. Sadly, The police chief's own daughter ended up being another murder victim of the killer. 1974 was before there was any real understanding or even term for serial killers, and this was a sleepy beach town in the off-season with a tiny PD, but still. They should have called in the state investigators or the FBI for help. The guy was not a criminal genius, and he did the same thing and hunted in the same area over and over. Omari Varela, the young boy abused to death by his horrible parents. There was a 911 call, possibly the boy himself, I can't recall, and the operator recorded lengthy verbal abuse from this boy's father. The police were called to investigate the abuse and failed completely in every aspect possible. It's so frustrating to listen to. They believed the parents, obvious lies, didn't talk to the boy alone, didn't report it. The boy died 6 months later. The Staircase, Michael Peterson, investigation that wreaked havoc spanning across years, due to the botched analysis/testimony of North Carolina SBI blood splatter analyst Dwayne Deaver and his team for the prosecution. So many things went wrong, from the initial crime scene, preserving evidence, etc., to the prosecution's evidence gathering, detectives' testimonies, and the fact that Dwayne Deaver's expert testimony was the foundation for the prosecution's entire case. Deaver's testimony was that the patterns seen in the staircase of the Peterson home were the result of Kathleen Peterson being beaten to death. When in fact, the analyst team was just trying to recreate the patterns to fit their case versus letting the evidence lead them to answers.